Morning, good afternoon to all of those of you who are joining us. We are at our second GP office hours here in March of 2024. We started GP office hours last month, and we will be continuing this series throughout the year. Today, our session is being sponsored by Avid Exchange, and we have a very special offer for everybody who is on the call. If you'll look in the chat, I have posted a link to our survey. So if you grab that link and put it in your browser and save it for later and give us some feedback on how we've done today, if you do that before midnight tonight, you will be entered into a drawing for a $250 Amazon gift card, compliments of our partners at Avid Exchange. Today, we're going to be talking about Dynamics GP, archiving your data. And I'm really excited. Our president of LBMC Technology Solutions, Brian Wilton, will be our presenter today. So Brian, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, Dawn, and hello, everyone. We are going to spend the next hour talking about purging data from Dynamics GP. So a couple of agenda items here. So this presentation is really designed to help you kind of understand the options and the reasons that you might want to choose to purge data. If there are some accounting folks on, like myself, I know purging data sends all kinds of red flags up and might rock your day a little bit, but we'll talk through that. It sometimes is okay to eliminate some data, and so we'll see if we can make sure everybody's comfortable with that. So our kind of detailed agenda, we really want to cover these four things: is archiving and possibly deleting data. Again, why you would want to consider that, what options you have to archive, and then kind of how to do it if you're going to remove data. So archiving, of course, is tucking it away somewhere. Purging is deleting. And so we'll talk about how to actually do that in the core modules, and then how to take out master records. So our GL accounts, vendors, customers, items, and so forth, those things that we may not need any longer. And so I think, Dawn, we wanted to do a quick poll.
Absolutely. So we're going to bring up our first poll question. And the question is, when are you interested in archiving data for your Dynamics GP system? As soon as possible, within the next year? We do not need to archive data in Dynamics GP. I'll give a few more seconds for folks to answer. Very good. I'll be ending the poll. Thank you for your feedback, everyone.
All right, and I think I saw our Avid Exchange.
So as I mentioned earlier, this session is being sponsored by Avid Exchange, and we have Christian Shakur here. And Christian, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Don, and thank you, Brian, and thank you to LBMC. My name is Christian. I'm based out of San Jose, California, and I've been with Avid Exchange now for just a year. And I want to really express my sincere gratitude to LBMC for giving us the platform to present to you all today. I've known LBMC actually for quite a while, and I know for the last 40 years they've been doing such excellent work for their clients. So we really appreciate the partnership and allowing me to speak today. So Avid Exchange, in case if any of you guys have never heard of us, we are an AP automation solution. We serve to all industries, and we are really focused on allowing businesses to do what they do best, which is doing business and not having to focus on the back office functions. And I really want to go ahead and get right into a customer story, a customer success story with Piedmont Services Group. They are an HVAC mechanical services company that specializes in energy efficient industrial HVAC solutions. And when they approached us, they said, hey, we are really struggling with the back office functions, meaning we have thousands of invoices laying around physically They're going into different locations. It's struggling to match the purchase order to all of the several invoices that are associated, and overall lack of visibility. Now, what does that do for all of you? That's a bottleneck from a time perspective, and of course from a cost perspective as well. They had to basically throw more people at the problem rather than seeing what kind of automation that they can input. And when we were discussing just these simple steps and how easy it is to actually not only just digitize your entire function as far as how do you want to go about, how an invoice is entered or how it's approved, but we really want to handle the full end to end and take as much off of your plate as possible. And when it came to Piedmont, for example, so they implemented both our invoice and our Avid Pay functions. So basically, from when an invoice enters our system, auto coded, approved, and actually paid through us. And they were able to cut a whole lot of time when it comes to the actual entering. Because if you guys don't have AP automation today, I'm sure you guys are probably hand keying those invoices into GP, which I know is a bottleneck as far as time. And it's really a lot of human error that's associated with it. And we've seen so many instances come up from our customers saying there's a lot of human error associated with these invoices. And they want to make sure everything looks good. So there's that piece of it. And then there's also really the payment portion of it. So not only do they want us to facilitate checks and direct deposits and virtual cards, they really want us to be able to take care of the full service that is associated with it. So, for example, when a customer can't, or if we know that a customer hasn't deposited their check in 30 days, they still don't want to have that responsibility of having to follow up with their suppliers. And they can actually have us do it. We have a team of 400 people that does this on a daily basis, or the onboarding to an electronic payment method instead of physical check. So we already know exactly how your suppliers want to be paid with our wide network of 1.2 million people on our network today. And with these solutions, what they were able to do obviously is increase efficiency by eliminating the paper and reducing the manual data entry, faster processing. Now they're able to just cut their processes down in 2 hours versus 2 days. So you can think about what that cost savings is for that organization. Obviously, more flexibility, more visibility, and then having that better visibility that will create sort of a sense of ease for an organization like this, and of course, our organizations abroad. And to get a little
Great.
bit into, oh,
Christian,
yes.
Brian, I'm going to ask you to stop sharing. And Christian, would you bring up your slides, please?
I was trying to do it earlier and I thought it worked. And I apologize about that, guys.
There it is.
Yes. Sorry, I use Microsoft Teams internally. And are you guys able to see my screen?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So this was the whole like Piedmont success story right here. I'm going to go right into the next slide here. So our unique approach. So how exactly do we work? So what we want to be able to do is have an easy way for you to enter your invoices. If you already have automated the way you guys are receiving invoices, whether it's, for example, receiving it via email, but we understand that there still could be some physical invoices laying around. We actually even have a PO box service. So if you don't want those invoices to be sent to you anymore, so you have to open them up and having to place them in the right place yourself, we can actually open them up for you and actually code them for you after that. But other than that, basically, once it's entered in our system, we have OCR and AI function, and we also have a team of human indexers. So our accuracy rate right now is at 99.97. So basically, the idea here is when an invoice comes in, it's already fully coded, and then from there, it already knows who to hand off to a specific approver. So we want to be able to dish away the walk into an invoice to a fellow employee for approval, or even the email chains that are not so consistent. So we want it to be able to know who it's supposed to go to, depending by account name or dollar threshold, for example, and then be able to hold people accountable of their actions too. So we'll be able to know whose lap it's sitting on, and then what actions they need to be able to take and be able to communicate within the system of that invoice, whether it was accepted or declined. And then as we go into the PO functionality as well, which I think is extremely important, we have a very, very sophisticated PO module. So we can do two-way or three-way match. And there's a couple ways we can go about it. We have our own system where you can create requisitions in AvidXchange, or it can be automatically imported from GP. So if you open requisitions in GP and you enter the invoice into AvidXchange, we'll be able to pick up the open invoice that it was created in GP and be able to do the matching. And that goes for the invoice. And let's say if there was a receipt or a packing slip, we'll be able to perform that three-way match from there. And then from a payment function, so this is where our real bread and butter is here at the company. So again, we want to be able to take as much off of your plate as possible. So we're, of course, handling all of the check handling. We process about 1 million checks a day. So we really know how to really handle checks, and not just delivery of the checks, but the follow-up of the checks as well, and be able to communicate with you and your suppliers to make sure that you guys are still maintaining a really good relationship, because of course the handoff of the money is really important. And of course, having a very robust supplier portal as well for your suppliers, absolutely free, so that they can actually see if they are receiving payments electronically, all of the invoices, sorry, all the payments that they are receiving from all their suppliers within AvidXchange. And there are rebates associated as well. So we are monetizing payments, and we have a really good success rate of customers who are currently using AvidXchange and receiving payments via virtual card and direct deposit. And if they are receiving in those methods, and we see basically a rate of anywhere from 25 to 40% of your current vendor master list on receiving payments and AvidXchange electronically, you will actually be receiving rebate earnings, which is really great. So you can invest back into your business. And just to get a little bit into ourselves, as far as the experience that we've had, we're probably one of the more veteran, I would say, AP automation solutions. We've been around since the year of 2000. We actually started out in the real estate and commercial property space, and we really were able to see how many other industries we're able to serve to today. We have right now 1.2 million people in our network receiving payments with other AvidXchange customers, with over 10,000 AvidXchange customers today. We have the most integrations out of any AP platform today. But I would say GP is probably our most sophisticated integration that we have yet. And we have tons and tons of GP customers that are very satisfied with AvidXchange and the integration that it offers, and supported by 1,600 people. The one thing I really want to point out with this stat is a third of our staff is currently doing service-based roles. And this is when I was talking about the human indexers, for example, or our supplier team that's engaging with your suppliers, making sure that they're paid the way they want to get paid. So we really not only want to count on technology, but we really want to count on service. That is really what we're all about here when it comes to money movement. And we're trusted by all of these great organizations, and really for us, it's about maintaining relationships and allowing businesses to do what they need to do without having to focus on the back office. Um, that is my little spiel, and thank you guys so much for the time.
Great. Thank you, Christian. So based on what we learned during that presentation, our second poll question has to do with AP automation. So the question is, does your organization suffer from any of these AP processing pain points? And you can pick as many as apply. So late or missing payments, just an enormous amount of time spent on manual data entry, breakdown in workflow approvals, lack of spend visibility, long fiscal close processes, limited visibility into payment status and approvals.
And Christian,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to tell Christian if he wants to stop sharing, I'll bring mine back up, but go ahead and finish the poll, Don.
Will do. So I'm going to give you a few more seconds here, and just use this time while you're looking through your options here to remind everyone that in the chat there is a link to our survey, and those who respond by midnight tonight are eligible to be in a drawing for a $250 Amazon gift card, compliments of the AvidXchange. So thank you, Christian.
Thank you so much, Don. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Christian. I can say I have personally been to the headquarters in Charlotte and the satellite in Salt Lake City. I think twice out there and 4 or 5 times in Charlotte. It is a phenomenal operation that's going on with Avid. So, and I do think you are the pioneers in that space, quite honestly. So I don't know that there's anyone that's been doing it longer than Avid Exchange.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Okay, so back to the details now of what we want to talk about. So why would you want to archive data? Well, a couple of common sense things, speed up performance. You might have some reports that you run a lot, trial balances, historic agings, and so forth that really get deep down into the data. Well, if you notice that over time they're taking longer and longer to run, it's probably because the system has to chunk through a lot of data that it may not even need, but it has to look at. And you see it a lot in smart list, where if you're trying to run a smart list and you notice it's starting to get slower and slower and slower over time, well, that's because the data is probably getting larger and larger over time. Sometimes folks with company policies will dictate and say, hey, we only want to keep 5 years worth of data in our ERP system. That kind of gets to the limiting the risk on the bottom of the slide there. Anything that's in there can be discovered in litigation. And some companies, larger ones, sometimes public companies, they will say, we're just not going to keep that much history. And so could be there's a company policy. There's data clutter, right? I mean, master records, customers, accounts you might have originally imported wouldn't go into Dynamics GP in the 80s or 90s. Some of that stuff's still sitting out there and is not used and has no value. You don't do business with customers or vendors, and so forth. So that's a good reason to maybe clean some of that stuff out of there. And then obviously, if that data is out there, it's got to be upgraded every time you do an upgrade. It's got to be backed up, at least once a day. And so that can cause performance issues on some of those things as well. So what options do we have when we're archiving? Well, probably the best one is a third-party solution from Professional Advantage. Some of you may have Company Data Archive, or you may have looked into it or seen it before. That really is a really nice solution because it allows you to create an archive company. And then every so often, generally once a year, you push an older year into that archive company and add to what's there. And so you're moving data from the live company into the archive. At that point, you can delete it from the live, and this utility will actually do that for you if you want it to. And Professional Advantage is a number of inquiry windows that you can actually use to see data from both companies, your live and your historical company. So that's kind of a cool option. Another way is a data warehouse, so something more generic. And you can get those pre-built. So Solver, for example, if you might be using or heard of their reporting and budgeting, planning, forecasting tools, they provide a company, or they provide a data warehouse now for us to use. We can dump our GP data in that. The beauty of the Solver warehouse is we can put anything else in there from any other solution. It doesn't matter what format it's in. We can put that into the data warehouse, and that's a good storage place, but we can report off of that. So if you have, of course, GP reports wouldn't pull that data, wouldn't report. But if you're using SQL reporting services reports, SSRS, if you're using Power BI or anything like that, of course, Solver provides reporting, so you could use their tools. But any of those kind of generic tools will pull data out of their data warehouse. And so you can run reports just like you're running them directly out of your GP system. And then you can do something even more generic with like an Azure Data Lake, where we're using Microsoft Azure's data warehouse to park data and then report back on it. The least popular and less likely way to solve your problem is a copy of the production database. So you can take a backup, you can restore it into an archive company. Well, of course, that's a point in time. And so then if you delete live data out of your live company that is now in the backup and newly restored database company, that works right then. But then 2-3 years later, you want to archive more data. And so you need then another copy of your live company. And so now you have two backup companies out there. And so over time, you get a lot of companies out there, and you have to kind of know, well, this company is for these years. This other company contains another set of years, and that gets really clunky. It is doable, but I would say it's a poor solution. And so, but you know, it's the poor person's route. So before you archive or purge anything, there's really one thing that you should do. Well, there's probably two. You probably should talk to your auditors if you are audited by you know, an outside CPA firm. If you have an outside firm doing your tax returns, you probably should discuss with them the timing and what their suggestion is. Certainly, you don't want to go take data out and get rid of it, you know, as of December 31st of 2023. That's too aggressive by any measure. But sometimes they'll tell you, you know, keep the last 4 years, 5 years, 7 years, and you can get rid of, meaning, you know, destroy anything older than that. So once you have that question answered, and then you're actually going to do the purging, the one thing you have to do is run a backup. And so there's no time that you would not do that. And once you do that, we also like to recommend that you kind of do these things in a test database, again, which is a copy of your live, restored, given another name, you know, ABC Company test, and run some of this in that test database and carefully review the results. Not just, oh, it, you know, the utility ran, it must have worked okay. Well, you want to make sure you're removing things that you want to and not removing things that you don't want to. And so what can you purge? Meaning, what can you delete out of the system when it's no longer needed? Well, pretty much everything. So transactions, distributions, distributions, of course, are the debits and credits, right? If you think about the distribution button on a lot of the subledger windows, well, that's the journal entries. The period histories, the journal entry itself, sales history. And sales history here is meant to be sales order processing. And accounts receivable. And then invoice history is if you're using the invoicing module and not sales order processing. Most people don't use that, but some do. And we'll talk about those specifically. And then your master files, so customers, vendors, items, and so forth. So getting into the financial, so this is our general ledger, right? He served with General Grant, if you remember your history. But general ledger, you have the ability here to remove transactions and account history, and then, you know, you can do that by different ranges. So I put the mapping in here on most all these, but these are all utilities. So everything that we're talking about today, with one exception at the very end, is going to be under tools, utilities, and then the module. So here, financial tools, utilities, financial, and then the option's called remove history. And so you'll see the screens here. You can remove the transactions and the accounts from years and periods and so forth. On this one, you can actually click on the button, and that's where you would put your ranges. And so, you know, a range could be a time frame. In this example that I pulled out of my system, I put a range of one of the segments in my account. So my location segment of 200. So if you open a store in another city, run that for a few years, and then decide, oh, that's not really worth it, and you decide to close it down for whatever reason, after a few years, you probably don't need those transactions. And a few that's the question for your accountants or auditors or CFO. You know, is it 5 years? Is it 10? Is it 4? And so here we can take out everything that was attached to location 200, because I closed that store 5 years ago and I don't need those things anymore. So the bottom right part of the slide talks about considering consolidating periods. And that's the textbook suggestion. I don't like it myself. What that does, and you could do this anytime, you don't have to purge data, but GP has the ability to go in and take a whole year and roll that into one number going forward. So if 10 years ago, you've got 100,000 debits and credits going through cost of sales, for example, some big account, you could have the system consolidate that into one number that brought that balance forward. I do have an accounting background. I don't like that. That feels wrong for some reason. And so to me, if you have it in there, you keep the detail. If you don't need the detail, then get rid of it. I don't like this rolling a whole bunch of transactions up into one solid number. And of course, you can never drill down or drill back on that. So that just feels wrong from an accounting standpoint. But why is that even in there? Well, many years ago, back in the 80s and 90s, if you remember, some of you, disk space was a premium. So we were operating off 20, 30, 40 gig, meg, megabyte, 40 megabyte hard disk was, cost $2,000 or something back then. And so disk space was at a premium. And Great Plains Software, prior to Microsoft, they built some of these utilities to help us save that all precious disk space back in the day. Well, that's not the case anymore. You can buy a terabyte drive for 10% of what a 40 megabyte drive used to cost. So we don't really need to do those things unless we have performance issues, like I said, and then we would move the data or get rid of it. Okay, so moving on to sales. Again, this is tools, utilities, sales. Lots of removes here because sales is a busy area. And so we can remove just about everything. The very last one there, remove invoice history. That is the invoicing module. That's not invoices out of sales order processing or SOP, as we say. That's the invoicing module. And if you have that, you would not be running sales order processing. You kind of do one or the other. But the sales history is coming from sales order processing. That's where we have the ability to enter quotes, orders, back orders, returns, invoices, and fulfillment orders, and so forth. So most people that do selling through Dynamics GP are using the SOP module, not invoicing, but there is a utility, obviously, to remove invoices from the invoicing module. And so, what do we do? Well, saying all these screens look alike, they're all utilities. You can go in and put in the ranges. That's why when I said you might want to do this in a test environment, so create a test company and do it. If you forget to put in the range, and if you look at the screen on the right, like post date is a range. And so that's generally how people do this, is I want everything from 1990 to 2000, for example, or 2010. Well, if you forget to click the insert button, then the system will process everything up to the moment you click the process button. So another reason we do backups. So, and you might think that can happen, but it can and sometimes does happen. So you really have to make sure you're calm. You have silence when you're inserting these ranges. And so you don't remove stuff you don't want removed. In sales, we can remove transactions and distributions at the same time. And so again, this is the receivable side. So we could take out the receivables transactions and the GL accounts associated with those at the same time. The comment here that I have in yellow up at the top there, if you pick a customer's invoice or a payment and the document that was applied to or from is in another date range, so if you said, I'm just going to remove 2020 transactions, but if a payment is in January of 2021, then that transaction from December of 2020, for example, would not get removed, because then the payment becomes stranded because that's outside of your date range. So you just have to, again, it's a good reason why you want to test some of this stuff, but you just have to kind of think through some of those things and kind of know the rules. And so, and it doesn't mean the system messed up and didn't grab that transaction. It's likely because there's a credit, if it's an invoice, there's a credit document outside of your date range. Okay, so removing period history, the only thing really to know here is a little bit of a good thing, I think, is the period summary, and we're talking about sales. So the customer period summary, the screen in the middle on the bottom there of the slide, that is what gets removed when you remove the period history. but the screen on the left, which is the yearly summary information, that does not get removed. So that comes from a different spot. And so, you know, again, you might want that removed. That's a different utility. You might not want that removed. So you just kind of have to look through these things and, okay, what's going to get dusted away if I use this utility? So it's kind of nice because you're not getting rid of everything, but you're getting rid of some of the detail, which takes up the slowness and causes the slowness and stuff if we're running smart lists and reports. Journal history, same thing. That's the posting journals, right? So you probably had to reprint those, or maybe you print those when you post from sales. Well, if you remove the posting journals, you cannot reprint the posting journal report. So it's gone, the data's gone. The caveat here is this affects the historical age trial balance. So if you think about it, if we go back into a prior year and remove the data and then decide we're going to run a historical aged from that period of time, well, if the data is gone, then the historical trial balance is not going to work. So so you have to keep that in mind as well in sales. When it comes to the the subledger sales order processing, which feeds up into accounts receivable or the receivables management module, same idea here. We can take out transactions, account distributions, the journal history, deposits. So, you know, in SOP, you can take a customer deposit on an order or an invoice, and then the document attachments. And so that's newer, since that's attachment feature has been built into Dynamics GP. You do that all from one window, and based on the type of transaction you pick, then the things down at the bottom that I have highlighted, those are available for you to select multiples or just do them one at a time. Let's see. And again, if you start taking out account distributions, transactions, journals, those reprint posting reports are not going to populate because you took the data out. Okay, so invoicing, this is the invoicing module, so not sales order processing. Same idea, we can do transactions, distributions, and journals. Well, in invoicing, we can't do customer deposits. That's not a feature, that's only in SOP. And so we have a scaled down list here because this module is skinny down from what we would do in sales order processing. But the same idea, the same type of screen here for us. And so, Dawn, I think we were going to do question 2, but you did that with Avid, right? So we'll continue on, and I've got question 3 coming up in a little bit later.
A poll question I can squeeze in there.
Oh, okay. All right. Well.
And this one is, I am interested in working with LBMC Tech to upgrade my version of GP or to conduct a business process review. Sometimes upgrading is a little complicated, and our consultants can talk you through what the process would be. And if you haven't had a business process review in 2 years, technology has moved very quickly. Business models have changed. There's a lot that needs to be done to remain competitive and profitable. And we have very talented people on staff to help you kind of map out what the current status is and what it would take to get to your ideal status. So we will end this poll.
All right. Thank you, Dawn.
And you're welcome.
Okay, so we move to purchasing and kind of accounts payable. So same general idea as sales, pretty much exactly, except in sales, you can't go by the posting date, only the document date in some of those things. But in payables, you can use the posting date. And so you might think, well, is that a big deal? Well, maybe not. But you do have to keep in mind that those dates are a little different. You could have a document date in one month and it being posted in another. And so, you have to consider that. And if you see data that's not coming out that you think should, that could be why. And so that's really the only difference between sales and the purchasing side, or just those two dates were swapped out. Somebody told me years ago that was a mistake in programming. I would think if it was, they would have remedied that. So I don't think it is, but that is a distinction between sales and purchasing. Removing period history, same thing as in sales. This doesn't affect the numbers on the vendor summary window, just the period summary. So, which can get confusing, right? But if you want to see what you've paid and invoices, vouchers that have gone in, credit memos and so forth for vouchers or for vendors in payables, the period history will blank out that window. The summary window will still be populated. So all is not lost. And that's because, again, they're in different parts of the system. And so the utility is fairly narrow focused, which is a good thing. When we get over to removing journal history, same thing is selling. The purchasing side is this does affect the historical age trial balance. So if you take out vouchers, invoices, payments from vendors coming into you, and that data is gone, and then you decide you're gonna or need to run a historical aged, that data won't be there. But the whole idea with this is you shouldn't really ever have to go back to that report or any of these reports. You're removing history that is probably quite a few years old. And so the idea is that you don't need that data. So if you do need the data, then you probably shouldn't purge it. And so, but these are just things to be mindful of. One note here, the way the journal history is in payables, all these have the ability to print reports. I personally probably would not print them to the printer because these are massive reports. This one in particular is one you should not print anywhere, not even to the screen, because every transaction is going to produce a report. And if you know GP, when you generate a report to the screen, and then you generate another one to the screen, well, you've got to close the first one, go up there and click the X before the second one will load up to the screen. And so if you do this and you have a lot of history, you will probably have to put a team together to work around the clock, clicking that X off the report, because there will be hundreds of thousands, in some cases, of reports that get generated, but certainly multiple thousands, even on a small system. And you don't want to sit there, have someone sit there to click the close button so the next report can generate. And they will stay out there forever until they're dealt with. So I almost sound like I maybe learned that the hard way 30 years ago, and that would be true. So don't make that mistake. If you do purchase orders or requisitions in Dynamics GP, so if you're using the requisition management piece, not a third party, but the built-in functionality, there's a window to remove purchase orders, purchase requisitions, attached receipts, and then the same kind of distribution and journal history around those receipts. Of course, purchase orders don't have journal entries because it doesn't make an entry into the system. The first time that an entry gets created with requisition PO is the receipt side. And so that's the account distributions and journal history here would be related to the receipts. And so same idea here. You decide if you need reports on these. If the data is no good, logically speaking, the report probably doesn't have a lot of value, but we can't be the ones to tell you that. But you can go through a lot of paper if you decide you're going to print some of these. So just keep that in mind. So moving on to inventory, a big list of things here. So same thing, really, transactions, the entries, the distributions, the period history, the journal history, stock count history, old stock counts. There's some question is if those are valuable. after you do another count. So, but again, that's not for us to say, but you can remove count history. Some people do that more frequently, although it's not taking up a ton of space. The assembly history is the bill of materials in inventory, not manufacturing. So this is the inventory module BOM or assembly functionality, and then some multi-bin utilities to clean those out. And then the inter-site transfer if you do the site-to-site transfer inside of GP. So same thing here, utilities, tools, utilities, and in this case, inventory. And the assembly is 2 components, transactions and journals. And again, this is the bill of materials that's part of the inventory module, that if you use inventory, you own and have the BOM. This is not the manufacturing. It's not a third party, Horizons or Vicinity manufacturing BOM. This is the inventory bill of materials. You can remove bins. This is generally if you have multi-bin functionality turned on. So if you don't, then you only have 1 bin. But multi-bin allows you to remove bins. The nice thing about this utility is it is used more frequently than just data cleanup, because you can use it to unassign bins from an inventory site. So earlier when we first started, we talked about we might open a store in a retail store in a new city and then close that store down in a few years. Well, we have the same inventory across the company, but we don't want that inventory to be assigned to those bins in that site, because that site doesn't exist. And we don't want people inadvertently moving inventory to a location that we don't even operate. And so that's a good utility to use to unassign those bins from either a closed site, or maybe you're rearranging the warehouse and something is not going into the same bin as it used to, but that's an assigned bin for that item. Well, you want to unassign that bin location for that item in your current site, or maybe your only site. And so that's a utility that gets used frequently throughout the year, and it's not just used for data cleanup. Okay, so some rules on this. What you would expect is obviously we can't remove bins if the bin is the default for the site. We can't take it away until we make another bin the default. We can't remove or unassign bins if there's quantity for an item in the bin, because then what do we do with that quantity? Where does it go? And if there's a pending transaction, maybe a site-to-site transfer or a purchase coming in or a sale going out, and there's something that's still pending, unposted in the site, obviously we can't take the bin site combination away for that as well. We can remove the bin transfer history. So again, this is a multi bin functionality feature where you do a bin to bin transfer, not a site to site, but a bin to bin within a site. And so we can remove that. This one's very simple. We just put in a date, and anything on or before that date will be removed. So, and it's just the history. We're not removing items or quantities or anything of the sort. We're just removing that transaction that said, hey, we're going to move this product from bin A to bin D, from 2000. Yeah, we probably don't need that history. So it's very simple. You can preview this and see what it's going to do. So again, not a bad idea. And then you see on the right side of the screen the little report that it will actually produce if you were to preview it. So so that's kind of handy if you use the multi-bin functionality. And then the last thing, well, second to last thing, I think for inventory is to purge the in-transit transfer. So if you use the Dynamics GP functionality of moving things from one location, one physical location to another, so site to site, not bin to bin, Dynamics GP added a number of versions ago the ability to track those transfers, inter-site transfers. This will remove that inter-site transfer history. And again, once something is to the new site, do you care where it came from, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, a year ago? Maybe not. So there's a utility to clean that up. It works exactly the same way as you put in a date range, or well, not a range, you put in a date. Anything on that date or prior will be removed from the system. So, and again, it's not touching the items or the quantities. It's just the history of item A moved from warehouse 1 to warehouse 2, on October 1st, 1990, that's what it's taking up. Okay, the last thing in inventory is the serial lot tracking. You have the ability to remove that database. I don't like that one either. Kind of like the consolidation of the account debits and credits into one number. I just don't like this. You might say, well, we don't have anything that we track serials or lots on anymore. We don't need that history, and that could be the case. After a period of time, that could be true. But this is basically one table, and unless you've been serial lot tracking for 50 years, it's probably not that large, and even then, but you can. So if you literally stop tracking, you had 5 items and you don't sell those items anymore, and there's not going to be any recalls, you don't need to know where something got shipped or who owns which serial number. If you're a food processor, then lots are important. If you have serialized things, those could be important. So if that stuff's all gone and they're not important anymore, then you could get rid of this if it bothered you to have that history out there. Okay, so the last section is just a couple of things here on deleting master files. So we can delete GL accounts. That happens a lot. 4 conditions, though, that have to be met. You can't have any transactions. That's logical, right? You can't delete the account because what would the system do with the transactions that are assigned to it? That's called general ledger out of balance situation. So it's saving you from doing that. So you can't have any allocation accounts, fixed or variable, that GL account is part of. You can't have that GL account in any quick journals or attached to any currencies. And so if those 4 are true, then you can delete the GL account. You can hit the button on the screen and the account will be deleted. If you put an account in, you've never used it, then obviously you can go delete it. So all 4 of those would be met. You can do, in this case, there's a year end, as you close your GL year end, there's an option here to remove. It's the default option is the system will delete any accounts that you've marked inactive during the year, as long as those 4 conditions are met. If you have inactive accounts and those 4 conditions are met, but you want to keep those inactive accounts in the system for whatever reason, then you can check the box here and say, don't delete my inactive accounts that meet those 4 criteria during the year-end close. So that's an option to do that. Other master files, vendors, customers, inventory items, same rules. You can't have any transactions assigned to a vendor, item, or customer. So you have to clean out the detailed data first. Then you could delete the master record. Inventory here, you have to do one at a time. The theory is, you probably don't want to delete in mass inventory items. Customers and vendors, that's not the case. You can do mass deletes if those vendors and customers have no transactions whatsoever attached to them anymore. But you just can't do that with inventory. Vendors, there's one little caveat you'll see there at the very top. If you have a vendor that's marked a temporary vendor, you can delete that and the system will delete the transactions. By saying this is a temporary vendor, you're telling Dynamics GP, you don't care about these transactions. It's kind of a one and done type thing. And a temporary vendor can be deleted with transactions. So most people don't use a lot of those, but if you do, that you can delete anytime. And then finally, the 2 places that remove doesn't remove. So even though it's called remove, for 30 years, I've been thinking they should change the name of that, but apparently I'm the only one on the planet that thinks that because they haven't done it. So and if you have receivables, you probably do the paid transaction removal as sales. Now notice these are routines, which means you do them over and over on some regular cadence. They're not utilities, which are generally one-time things you're doing to the data. So that's the tip, that these are not really removing because they're routines, not utilities. So if you have receivables, again, you've done that one probably every month. And then the other one is if you use purchase order, you can remove completed POs, and it doesn't remove them on both of these. It removes them from open status to history, HIST status. So when you're looking at a customer in the system, anything that's in open has not been touched with paid transaction removal. If you run paid transaction removal on that customer, go back and look, anything that's fully applied, so credited off by either a payment or a credit memo, if it's an invoice, then all 3 or 2 of those, whatever is attached to that invoice, would get moved and set to historical status. So that's really what those are doing. They're not deleting data out of the system. So Dawn, do we have any more gripping poll questions?
It's the last one.
All right.
And we offer a number of options for your future. We are able to host GP in the cloud. We also offer Business Central and Sage Intacct. And so as you look ahead to the future, let us know if you are interested in any or all of these solutions. The great thing about our consultants is that they can really help you compare and contrast and find the best fit for you. And that is the last poll question. So I'll just give a couple of seconds. And for those indicating hosted GP, we're going to have in May, where GP office hours is going to focus on hosted GP. All right. Thanks everyone for answering.
All right. Okay, so just in wrap up here, a couple of things that might be of interest. If you go to the Dynamics Community Summit, which is all products Dynamics, so GP, CRM, the cloud products, Business Central, finance and supply chain, and all the third-party vendors that support those products. If you've been before, you know these are really, really large events. The one last October was the largest in probably 10 years. So that event is this October 13th through the 17th in San Antonio. So that'll be a phenomenal location for this. Registration is open. If you do decide to register, you can get 10% off by using this code LBMC10. And so that will take 10% off of your registration fee. Upcoming office hours, that's what we're doing here. This is something new. We've just started for the first time ever, is every month. So the 3rd Tuesday of every month, we have one of these little sessions. And so the next 2, GP inventory, you got this coming up in April next month. And then after that in May, we'll be talking about hosting Dynamics GP in the cloud. So mark your calendar on those. There's no cost or anything. You have to answer the poll questions, but not really. But we're working on the rest of the year and adding topics. If you have a topic you would like to see an office hours session on, just please let us know. We're happy to put that on the list. Okay, so the future of ERP, Dawn just mentioned in the poll question there. If you are not ready to do anything different, GP is working well for you and you're committed to it, we are as well. If you decide you don't necessarily want to be in the server business and have that, maybe you need a new server and you know those things are expensive, and all the SQL licenses and the Windows and the backups and now more than ever all the antivirus protection and so forth. Maybe your IT company is, you know, done something different and they're going a different direction and you just want to move GP to a new server. We could move that to a cloud server for you. Works the same way, still your license. We still upgrade it. We still support it. It's no different at all to the users. It's just sitting in either Microsoft Data Center or Amazon are the 2 that we use. Those are the 2 main players on the planet today. But if you do have interest in looking at a SaaS product, Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central is really, really strong for manufacturing and for companies that are in the distribution business. That's kind of our go-to product. So that is the mid-market kind of replacement for GP. But if you're not doing manufacturing or heavy distribution, then a lot of our GP clients have really enjoyed the move to Sage Intacct. And so specifically in these industries that we've got listed on the slide, but anybody that's just doing core accounting, so which means general ledger, payables, receivables, banking, project work, so professional services, so things like we do where we build time. Sage Intacct is a really strong fit for that, and in some cases stronger than the Microsoft Business Central product. But those are our children. We love them equally. They just sometimes are better at certain jobs than others. So if you have that in mind and you want to speak to your account manager or your consultant about what that would look like to do any of the three of these, we are ready and able to help you at any time. So if you're curious about Copilot, Microsoft's, that's a big thing now. That's the biggest and latest and greatest is Copilot, which is the artificial intelligence. So this is like ChatGPT, but Copilot is Microsoft's product, although they own a good amount of the ChatGPT company. But Copilot is native. It's built into Business Central and has been for a year. It's native now, potentially, if you have the right license in your Office products, so Word, Excel, Outlook, PowerPoint, and so on, and really going to touch all of our lives. So you will not escape artificial intelligence. And unless, if you're retiring at the end of this month, you might, but if you're not retiring March of 2024, you're not going to get around our AI, as we call it. So if you want to learn more about that, we've got a number of articles that are on our website that are really, really strong. And of course, we can speak with you on that as well and how you can benefit from that. Okay, Dynamics 365 users. So we're doing this is more on the CRM side. But if you want to join us on April 18th, you will learn how to build your own custom application that can be used in a number of ways in your business. So it's really meant to make things simpler, so streamline a process. If you have a form on your website that you want to create for people to fill out, and then something happens with that form, it goes, based on workflow to different departments or folks and so on, you will enjoy this session. And so again, no cost on any of this. But sign up for that off our website under the webinars and events section of lbmctech.com. Okay, Dawn, I think I'm out of breath there. So any closing things that we need to do or mention?
Yes, we would like to thank Christian for his wonderful presentation on AP automation and how that works with Microsoft GP, and for their sponsorship of our event. In the chat, there is a link for the survey. Please fill that out before midnight tonight to be eligible for the $250 gift certificate. We had a question about the webinar on the 18th for the Power Apps. That registration page is not built yet, but I put up our webinars and events page, and as soon as that is created by the team, the registration will be available there. Thank you everyone for attending, and please be sure to mark your calendar. If you are using GP inventory, you will not want to miss next month's GP office hours on GP inventory. Brian, thank you very much for the presentation today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dawn, and our Christian and friends from Avid. They have a phenomenal solution, and thank you all for attending.
Bye, everyone.